My son came to me with an obscure internet article a week ago or so, alleging that major media companies are controlled by a secret cabal of large corporations. He spends a fair amount of time online on YouTube, following internet threads, and perhaps a little too much. And myself, working for a major media company as I do in PR, I have thoughts on the topic. My response to him was a little curt. I do worry about self-censorship sometimes, especially in large commercial media that don't want to offend advertisers, but having overt control by a cabal of wealthy corporations seems like a bit too far. So we had another conversation on what source are you looking at for this information. But my wife and daughter, listening to our conversation, thought I was a little too short with him. And honestly, I was impatient. I didn't sound very thoughtful and considerate when I responded. But reflecting on it, I am happy that he thinks about ideas like this and comes to me with questions. So I've resolved to be more thoughtful, to really work harder to listen, to have a deeper conversation with him. And it made me think about the conversations I have in my community as well. When I'm out walking my dog, I run into neighbors who are pleasant to talk to. We talk about the weather, what they're doing to their house, et cetera, et cetera. Once in a while, we will touch on topics like crime and immigration, and I discover that we are of different political persuasions. And it is my goal, when I have those opportunities, to draw them out and to actively listen and engage. I really think we need to do as much as we can to break out of the bubbles that we were all so comfortably in. This is a wonderful bubble right here where we're all very comfortable with each other. But the real work is outside, is talking to friends and neighbors who share different opinions and listening to them. I think helping them to feel heard, and then hopefully beginning the process of expanding their thoughts, their source of ideas, and perhaps the same for me. So I'm going to share a story that illustrates this topic. It's written by Doug Lippman, and it's about two villagers who come to a rabbi with a dispute. When the rabbi invited them to sit down and talk about it, they glowered at each other. At last, they sat at the rabbi's table, casting angry glances at each other. Then the rabbi said, do you have anything more to say, Shlomo? And Shlomo asserted he had more to say, and the rabbi kept listening until at last Shlomo said more calmly, no, I have nothing more to say. Next, the rabbi turned toward the other villager, Moshe, and asked, what happened? The rabbi listened to him and asked him questions until he too said, I have nothing more to say. The rabbi rose, saying, I will deliberate on this and come back with a decision. Less than 1 minute later, the rabbi returned, sat down at the table, and said, I have reached my verdict. The rabbi described the verdict to them. Shlomo and Moshe looked at each other and each said, all right, that solves it. They shook hands and left. Another man had been in the room and had watched all this. He said to the rabbi, you found the solution in just 1 minute. Why did you let them talk so long when you knew the answer right away? The rabbi said, if I had not listened to each one's full story, each would have resented my decision. It wasn't my judgment that solved the problem. What solved it was listening to their entire stories. So an interesting perspective there. May your roots grow deep, may your branches spread far, may you find the world to be a wonderful place and leave it better for those who follow. So we're going to move into our offering now. We support the work of our congregation through the gift of our time, our talents, and our treasure. Your financial contributions help support the ongoing work, and including worship, religious exploration, community care, and connection. And your generosity is reflected in the ways we are able to show up in our community for justice and service. So to contribute, you can use the baskets coming around, and you can also use the link in the chat online that Ken is pasting in. And you can contribute to our Helping Hand Fund, which provides support to local organizations, and our Minister's Discretionary Fund. I believe that basket is in the back. It's going around too. Well, the Helping Hand Fund. We're going to hear some beautiful offertory music from Stephen, from Eric Satie. For meditation, I've chosen some words from Alice Anacheka Nasman, entitled Meditation on Hope and Love in a Time of Struggle. In a world so filled with brokenness and sorrow, it would be easy to lose ourselves in the never-ending grief, to be choked by our outrage, to be paralyzed by the enormity of suffering, to feel our hearts squeezed tight with hopelessness. Instead, this morning, let us simply breathe together as we hold our hearts open. Breathing in as our hearts fill with compassion, breathing out as we pray for healing in our world and in our lives. Breathing in, opening ourselves to the transforming power of love. Breathing out as we pray for peace in our world and in our lives. Breathing in as we hold hope in our hearts. Breathing out as we pray for justice in our world and in our lives. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Breathing in, we are the prayer. Breathing out, we are the healing. Breathing in, we are the love. Breathing out, we are the peace. Breathing in, we are the hope. Breathing out, we are the justice. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Amen. Blessed be. May it ever be so. Please join me in a moment of silence, reflecting on the breaths that she referenced. I'll play a chime to bring us back. As we enter into this prayerful moment for joys and concerns, where we set aside the mundane and share our deep joys, our sorrows, and the concerns of our hearts. When you come to the mic, please state your name and be brief, and the folks on Zoom will let Ken know if they would like to speak. So if that is you, or you know of someone else who could use a visit, please use the Joys and Concerns link in your chat or order of service, or connect with Pam Wittenberg. She's heading up that group right now, and we want to make sure that everybody is taken care of. Please stand again as you are willing and able to sing another hymn. We are going to sing from the Teal hymnal, number 1040, Hush. That's the Teal hymnal, number 1040. Stephen will give us an introduction.
Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do?
Okay, and we look forward to Erling's message.
I am not a licensed pilot, and I do not know how to fly this plane. But I have a checklist. Pilots and surgeons are big on checklists. That's good. Okay, sound. Who can hear me in the back? Can you hear me in the back, everybody? Okay, all right. I'm gonna look at you. You're gonna tell me if I'm sensitive, but just stand close to the microphone. I do tend to move around. So, okay. All right. What is the last significant thing that you've changed your mind about? This is not going to be easy. Not many people know this. I'm not accustomed to talking about this. But I used to be a dog person, and now I'm a cat person. So I know some things about transformation. And it's not something that I sought out. It happened, and there were very practical components to it. All my life I've had wonderful dogs who I admired, who told me I was awesome, and I believed them. And then I got a shit dog. I love him, but he's kind of a crap dog. I love him, but he gives me nothing. And he tells me I'm a piece of shit. What are you gonna do? And then I met a cat. And this cat is wonderful, is glorious. I didn't plan this, it just happened. There are parts of transformation that are just nuts and bolts practical. We shifted the day an hour just by turning a dial. Now the evenings are going to be later. Like, we just did that. We just decided to shift the frame, and now it's so. You can still hear me okay? So they're like real nuts and bolts parts of transformation, and I live mostly in nuts and bolts kind of life. I make things out of material, and it's very practical in that way. But there's also the imagination. And the imagination, every groove can become a rut. We can get stuck. And shifting ourselves out of those frames, sometimes that takes a jolt. I had a dream not long ago. My cat, she just snuggles up with me and just like a football, like a teddy bear all night right here, just purring all night. It's heaven. And I had a dream a couple of weeks ago that all night I was snuggling with big furry dogs. This is not a perfect formula. It's not a complete transformation. I have, like all of us, contradictions built in. I have unresolved things working themselves out, and like what is What is not interesting about these contradictions that we all have? They're what make us interesting. Everybody should have a favorite word, I think. This is a policy of mine for life, and I have a bunch. Most of them are auto-antonyms, which are words that have their own opposites built into them. Words like sanction, which can mean to condemn or to condone, like oversight, which can mean to oversee or to overlook. Words like dust, which can sprinkle it on or brush it off. Seed a field or seed a tomato. These are their own opposites, right? Moby Dick, a fast fish, is one that is secured to the boat. It's not one that's moving around. Literally is our new favorite. Auto-antonym. Literally, which now means its own opposite. Figuratively, what we used to say, literally. Right? Does that bother anybody? It still bothers me a little bit. Religion is a big one. It's one of my favorite words. Religio, to bind together again in brotherhood and sisterhood, as parts of a whole, as the reunification of the divided self, or religio, to bind back again psychologically, sexually, socially. These are words, these are ideas that have their own built-in contradictions, as each one of us do, as every moment does. This moment right now, when this year, when more people on the planet will vote than have ever before in history, I think that's true, at the same time as autocracy is maybe reaching some kind of an apex. There was a moment not long ago for all of us, that just transformed everything that year. 4 years ago, right now, where were we? 4 years ago, right now, March 2020. Some of us were wondering, is this going to go on for another 2 weeks? Do you remember? Go back to that moment. There were some really interesting things going on. I mean, we were all in it together. For the first time in the history of the species, everyone on the planet was in this situation together, but isolated and alone. That was odd. I remember there was like a 6-week period when it just felt like a dream. Did anybody else get that? It felt like a dream. Do you remember when the lockdown was happening and everything was shutting down and everything was turning sideways? It felt like a dream that you just couldn't wake up from. At the same time, I don't know, it was this weird sense of having woken up for the first time. Having been pulled out of the rat race, not all of us had that experience. Some of us were plunged first responders. I mean, this was not the same experience for everybody, but for a lot of people. The overview effect. Does that ring a bell? Anybody know what the overview effect is? So, Frank White was a NASA guy, not an astronaut, significantly. And he had this experience on an airplane, not in a spaceship, but he had this intuition and he started interviewing astronauts. And he started to describe this phenomena that he came to call the overview effect. He's interviewing NASA astronauts, the most buttoned down, straight ahead, no nonsense people possibly on the planet. Like these are serious people who, you know, they're a nuts and bolts. These are my people. These are nuts and bolts people. And getting in a spaceship and going up there and looking back and seeing this delicate blue sphere rearranges them. They come back some amount different people. Their priorities shift, their life is a different thing to them now. He came to call this the overview effect. And he had the experience in an airplane. We've all caught a glimpse of this, haven't we? If you've been on top of a mountain, that's the same thing. A tall building will give you some hint of this. It's just this effect of being pulled out of your life, having a shift of perspective, being reminded of how small we are, and how vast everything else is. And that frame shift, to be shown that we're a part of this thing. So for a lot of people, 2020 was a kind of overview effect because we were pulled out of our day-to-day. And at the same time, it was kind of the opposite because we were pulled out of our day-to-day by being plunged and locked down into it. So that was odd. That was odd. There is in the overview effect, I think, unavoidably, another word with some interesting built-in contradictions: awe. So awe, right? So there's a sense of, there's an element of fear, of terror. Oh my, you are this tiny in this vast universe. Captain Kirk went up into Bezos's spaceship. Didn't anybody hear about this? William Shatner went up, and his glimpse of the overview effect was terrifying to him, was shattering. He was in despair for months. He still talks about it. There's footage of him having landed with Bezos popping champagne, and Shatner, all he can do to keep from crying, because all he has seen is mortality, is his own and all of our mortality in the vast emptiness of space. It's a different experience. It's a different experience. It's not a universal experience for everybody, but does anybody know what artists are for? What are artists for?
Make art.
Make art. What's art? Go ahead.
Feeling of your heart.
I want you to try this on, okay? The job of the artist is to take wildly disparate ideas and phenomena and combine them into novel and compelling arrangements to show us the kinship between everything, to show us that everything has its place in this shrinking world, in this increasingly frictive world. To use contradictions to transform our experience. That's what I think artists are for. Artists are technicians of awe. I mean, we're nuts and bolts people. There's a lot of practicality, materials, keeping them dry and warm and not sullied. And you gotta take care of stuff. Writers, all they need is a damn laptop. So terror and trust. I want to tell you a story. And I want to tell you a story in a context. In this context, we are living through the coalescence and implementation of a radical agenda of corporate deregulation executed by means of stories of child-eating vampires and shape-shifting alien reptoids populating the deep state. The far right has stories figured out. They have nailed stories down. They're shitty stories. They're old, boring, unoriginal stories, but they know how to use them. We have better stories. We're just not using them. On the last day of the year 1600, the colonization and enslavement of Europeans by a population of non-terrestrial, sociopathic, artificially intelligent entities began in earnest. From vibrant city centers in London and Antwerp, this invasion spread outward, gradually spanning the globe over the course of the following decades and centuries. Naive to the fragility of their connection to the human family and fixated on promises of material gain, Europeans eagerly consented to their capture. While outwardly they prospered, inwardly they decayed and withered. In an imitative process of trauma transferal that would repeat itself down to the most granular level, colonized became colonizer, enslaved became slaver, until eventually the individual perpetuates the operation on themselves. Only the most stubborn assertions of humanity, of imagination, of empathy, of critical discernment are sufficient to break these chains of causation and coercion. We are entering the final stages of this now, with our last vestiges of agency and clarity in the balance. Earth, at the turn of the 17th century, was a planet teeming with life and organic resources. A little ice age had cooled temperatures enough to curtail oceanic storms, prompting an increasingly robust schedule of maritime trade and exploration. And the inhabitants of the European peninsula had just begun knitting science, industry, and warfare into a cohesive cultural sector, heralding a new era of resource extraction. These developments gained the notice of this federation of non-corporeal, hyper-empowered beings, and their program of subjugation began. Within 2 decades, the establishment of racialized, globalized maritime slave trade, the institutionalization of genocidal colonization methods, and the manipulation of climate dynamics through the mass culling of whale populations was firmly secured. At the half-century mark, nation-states were formalized to secure the dominion. Roughly a third of the human population is estimated to have been subjected to this regime by the end of the 17th century. What am I talking about? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Good guess. For-profit, publicly held corporations. The first ones chartered in 1600. Everything else I've just read here is factually true, according to the rules of logic and language. These are non-terrestrial, non-corporeal, they don't have bodies, they're not made of earth. They're artificially intelligent, per Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek's formulations, that the best machine for calculating value is a corporate free market. They're sociopathic because publicly held for-profit corporations cannot have consciences. They are unable to have anything resemble a conscience, even as they accumulate statuses of personhood. They are not raised by families, by teachers, by communities. So when tobacco or petroleum executives lie to Congress, they have no choice. This is their job. It is easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. This is Jameson, or this is Zizek, I don't know. It's a common trope. But maybe the job is to imagine ourselves in a different relationship with capitalism, a post-binary relationship with capitalism. Our job is reach your hand out. There's nothing you can touch that hasn't been brought to you by these entities. So our job is not to destroy these corporations. Our job is to tame them, to domesticate them, to somehow instill, to hack into their programming, and to instill some kind of a virus resembling conscience. because capitalism is the greatest engine of ingenuity and innovation, as well as of absolute reduction of poverty that the world has ever known. At the same time, it is the greatest instrument for the increase of relative poverty. For up till the mid-20th century, the greatest crimes against humanity, for the degradation and, let's say it, genocide of the inner life of the human being. And it is also, by the way, a slow-motion doomsday device. Fear, but also trust. Activate the imagination. These are stories that we live in. We live inside these stories. And people with bad motives know how to make stories, make real things happen. Back to the practical. We've been talking about offshore life. How am I doing on timing?
Almost under it.
Cool. Offshore, near offshore life in the last decade, I don't know, have you noticed? It's just exploded. It's been wild. I grew up with Menhaden bunker being little minnows this big, and you'd catch them at the beach with little nets, and they were not consequential. And then in the last 12 years, they were like this big. And now they're foot-long fish that just flop around. I mean, they're huge. And everybody's coming to eat them. We have humpback whales breaching 100 yards offshore. Dolphins you can hear when you go underwater. You can hear them whistling to each other. Don't forget this. It took me 56 years to figure this out. When you see dolphins swimming offshore, it doesn't matter. They can be far off there. Go in that water. Put your ears underwater. You can eavesdrop on them, whistling to each other and clicking at their... It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And this has happened because we turned a dial. We wrote some regulation restricting the harvesting of Menhaden. Menhaden is funny because if you catch one and you put it in a frying pan, all you end up with is a fish skeleton in a pool of oil. And that's why everybody loves to come and eat them. That's why everybody out there is coming to eat, because they're just fatty. They're just so delicious to these creatures. Not to us. But this is such a practical, simple thing that we've done. Here's a thing I want to see all my friends do. I want to see all of us do. Make this normal. If you're a traveler, if you do an airplane trip, and if you also do social media, post about that trip, sure, fine. But also, post where you got your carbon offsets. Post where you bought your carbon offsets. Make that normal. Who cares? Virtue signaling, you know, this is the era of vice broadcasting. We need a little more virtue signaling. We just went to Japan and back. 3 tickets. My youngest and my wife and I. The tickets cost a couple of grand or whatever, but the carbon offsets cost $480 for 3 round-trip tickets to the other side of the planet. It's not a big expense. It's worth it. Do it. Make it normal. Post about it. That's a little practical thing. Happy spring coming, everybody.
Thank you, Erling. So as we think about that overwatch effect of how we feel when we consider the overview, thank you, how we feel when we see the earth in its fragility and beauty as that blue marble, please rise and we'll sing Blue Boat Home to reflect on that image. That's number 1064 in the Teal hymnal.
Though below me I feel my motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling oceans, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port I've known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, oh, we kindred pilgrim souls, making a way by the lights of the heavens and our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves uphold me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor nor port I have known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
For our closing words, I've chosen a short benediction from Dorothy Day that describes how transformation and indeed massive cultural shifts take place. It is called, "There is Too Much Work to Do." People say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is too much work to do. Please join me in reading the words for extinguishing the chalice in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please remain seated for Stephen's postlude, and maybe we can even sing along with some of it.
This song is from the early 1960s. The answer's been blowing in the wind for about 60 years now. It's a windy day, it might blow in here. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand. Yes, and how many times must the cannonball fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And how many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head, pretend he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? How many years must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And thanks for singing along.